Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's review of Avatar: The Way of Water. It is the new film directed by James Cameron starring Sam Worthington and Zoe Saldaña. The film takes place more than a decade after the events of the first film. When we last saw Jake Sully, played by Sam Worthington, he was a former US Marine who was recruited by a multi-million-dollar company who seek to colonize the planet of Pandora. Jake infiltrates the Na'vi, an indigenous humanoid alien race native to the planet, and he does so in the form of an avatar, a remote-controlled body that is grown from human DNA mixed with the DNA of the natives. But as Jake begins to learn their ways, he falls in love with the chief's daughter, Neytiri, played by Zoe Saldaña, after which he decides to switch sides and defends the Na'vi from the human race, who seek out to destroy their home in order to exhume their natural resources. Years later, we now see Jake fully adapted to the life of the Ometekaya clan and has now raised a family with Neytiri. But then the humans return to Pandora and they sent out a bunch of Na'vi avatars with the memories of deceased RDA Marines, and their leader is none other than the deceased Marine Miles Quaritch, played by Stephen Lang. Their mission is to hunt down and kill Jake Sully, and when Jake realizes that he is putting the entire Ometekaya clan in jeopardy, he decides to take his family and relocate to the Metkayina tribe, a water clan that resides on Pandora's eastern seaboard. Now, I love the first Avatar. It is still one of my favorite films of all time, but despite being a fan of the franchise and of James Cameron as a filmmaker, I promised myself that I would remain objective in my review. So, let's get the obvious stuff out of the way. Just give this movie the Oscar for visual effects right now. Seriously, guys, the visual effects in this movie is insanely good. James Cameron has spent 13 years perfecting the technology that he developed in the first film in order to shoot this one. In this film, we spend a great deal of time underwater, and James Cameron didn't want to shoot those scenes in a very conventional way. He actually wanted to place the actors and the camera inside the water in order to create the most authentic, submersive experience as humanly possible. Also, every character in this film was created using motion capture, and you can tell he spent a long time perfecting the technology. The faces that distinguish each actor is displayed much more prominently, and I love how the humans and the computer-generated characters are interacting with each other so seamlessly. This film just looks and feels incredibly realistic. I mean, you cannot even tell that this film uses green screen, unlike some other films that I can mention. And I know the first film is heavily criticized for being conventional and formulaic, but I feel like this film did a great job at bringing more depth into the characters, in particular with Miles Quaritch. This was a massive improvement. In the first film, Quaritch seemed like a cookie-cutter villain, and, spoiler alert, he dies. But in this film, his DNA and his memories are stored in the body of an avatar. So in a way, he is reborn in the form of his enemy. So you can tell that this guy is going through an identity crisis here, which made his character much more compelling. Another character that I found interesting in the film was Loak, played by Britton Dalton, who practically steals the movie from everybody else. He is the second son of Jake and Neytiri, and he is constantly living under the shadow of his older brother Neteyam, who he feels like is always presented as the golden child, the perfect son, and he is always struggling to live up to his parents' expectations. He is also struggling with the fact that his father is half human. To the Na'vi, the humans are referred to as demons, and when they are first introduced to the Metkayina clan, they are essentially referred to as demon children. So this film touches up nicely on what it's like to be an outcast. And the film has a bunch of other characters too, such as Kiri, a Na'vi child who is adopted by the Sully family, who seems to have a very deep spiritual connection to the world of Pandora. And there's also Spider, a human who is living amongst the Na'vi as if he was one of them. And the film doesn't touch up on too much detail as to where they come from or who they are, which in my opinion kind of works in its favor, but it also could be its detriment. detriment. On that note, let's move on to some negatives that I had with the film. First and foremost, the plot is extremely muddled, and that became apparent to me within the first 20 minutes of the film, because the film is trying to catch you up to speed as to what happened between the first film and the second film. And with that came a lot more new storylines and a lot more new characters, and it did feel a bit clunky at times. In fact, I feel like the film even abandoned certain developments from the first film, including some characters that had a major part to play. There are a few characters from the first film that are reintroduced in this film. However, they didn't have a lot to do. And at a certain point, I wondered why they were in the film in the first place, which, in my opinion, kind of renders them as useless. And furthermore, there was a moment at the end of the film in which one of the characters has a sort of revelation, which made me feel like they could have come to that conclusion in the beginning. Why did they have to go through this struggle in order to get to that point? However, the writers of this film did set up something about this character, and the journey that they went on kind of justifies it in a way, but it just didn't hit me as hard as it should have. And even though Jake and Neytiri are the main protagonists of this franchise, I'm sort of glad that they chose to focus more on their children, as their storylines were much more interesting than theirs. Like I said, James Cameron did a great job at bringing more depth into the characters. However, because of the film's extremely long runtime, he didn't go deep enough as he could have. He was only able to scratch the surface. I don't know if that's because he is saving all the good stuff for the third film. And by the way, you could tell after watching this film that there is going to be a third one. No one said that James Cameron is the best writer, but that doesn't mean that he is a bad storyteller, because let me tell you, he's not. The one thing that makes up for the film's faults was the action. And I can tell you with 100% certainty that after watching this film, I fully believe that James Cameron is probably the best director when it comes to action. Every time that there was a battle sequence or epic showdown in this film, it was flawless. The way it was shot, edited, paced, choreographed, Cameron can do no wrong. So the first half of the film was a bit shaky, but the second half was amazing. And there is a huge payoff at the end, so trust me, it'll be worth it. Would I say that this film is better than the first one? Technologically speaking, yes. I wish the first one had the visual effects that this one had. However, I know you cannot go back in time and fix everything. Believe me, George Lucas has tried. Narratively, the first film works better as a whole, whereas in this film, it works only in part. But even if you're not a fan of the franchise, I highly recommend that you see this film at least once in your life. What this film has done is probably open the doors for future films and future filmmakers, and the bar is raised so high in terms of visual effects that other production companies really need to catch up to James Cameron. Also, I highly recommend that you experience this in 3D, because this movie was made for it. So despite the problems that this film has, and the film does have problems, I truly, sincerely enjoyed watching it. I still love the franchise, and I cannot wait to see what happens next. I'm just glad I don't have to wait another 13 years for the next film. So I'm going to give Avatar: The Way of Water a B+. Thank you for watching my video, ladies and gentlemen. I hope to see you again next time.